All right, let's just jump right in. Have you ever sat at your desk and just dreamed of leaving that 9 to 5 grind? Like decades before everyone else? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down today. We're talking about FIRE. That's financial independence, retire early. And look, this is way more than just piling up a bunch of cash. It's really a revolutionary lifestyle movement, and it's all focused on one simple, powerful thing: buying back your time and basically reclaiming your life.
And this quote, wow, this really gets to the absolute heart of the whole thing. It's such a powerful reminder, right? Because think about it. We're surrounded by what looks like wealth. The fancy cars, the huge houses, all that stuff. But so often the reality under the surface is just a mountain of debt. True wealth, the kind we're talking about here, isn't about looking rich. It's about having the freedom to make your own choices without being chained to a paycheck. It's the power to say no to a job you can't stand and a big yes to the life you actually want to build.
So let's get specific. What is FIRE, really? Well, at its core, it's a movement with one big goal: build up enough assets, investments that make money for you, so that you don't have to work for a paycheck anymore. It's that simple. Once you hit that point of financial independence, you get the ultimate prize, the option to retire. And we're not talking about retiring at 65. We're talking about maybe 50, 40, or for some people, even in their 30s.
All right, so where in the world do you even start with something this big? Well, the whole journey to FIRE kicks off with a really, really hard look in the mirror. Before you can even think about planning this awesome future, you've got to get brutally honest about your financial truth right now.
And this is where things get really interesting and maybe a little scary. There's this huge gap between what we think we spend and what we actually spend. I mean, studies show that most of us, you and me, underestimate our spending by a whopping 20 to 30%. That's huge. And you just can't build a solid plan for your freedom on a foundation of fake numbers. It just doesn't work.
So what's the solution? Well, the FIRE community has a great name for it: a forensic audit. It sounds intense, but it's pretty simple. You download an entire year's worth of your bank and credit card statements, and you go through it line by line, categorizing every single dollar. What you're doing is hunting for the leakage in your financial boat. Those subscriptions you forgot you had, the daily coffees that add up, all those little impulse buys. And listen, this isn't about making you feel guilty. Not at all. It's about getting the real data so you can build a seriously powerful future.
Okay, so once you actually know where every dollar is going, there's one number that becomes the single most important metric on this whole journey, and that's your savings rate. It's simply the percentage of your take-home pay that you save and invest. And for people who are dead serious about FIRE, the target is, well, it's aggressive. We're talking 50, 60, sometimes even 75%.
And this chart, it just perfectly shows the massive difference in mindset. The average person, right, they're saving somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 10%. But the FIRE movement, they're aiming for a rate that's 5, maybe even 10 times higher. This isn't just about tweaking your budget a little bit. No, this is a fundamental, ground-up shift in how you think about and handle your money.
Okay, let's take stock. You know exactly what you spend. You've got an aggressive savings goal. But what are you aiming for? What's the actual finish line? This is where we calculate your magic number, your FIRE number.
And here's the beauty of it. The formula is incredibly simple, but so powerful. It's called the Rule of 25. You take your total yearly expenses, the real number you found from your audit, and you just multiply it by 25. That's it. So for example, if you spend $60,000 a year to live, you multiply that by 25, and you get $1.5 million. That is your financial independence number. That's the target.
So you might be asking, why 25? Where does that number come from? Well, it's the flip side of something called the 4% rule. It's based on decades of historical market data from a famous analysis called the Trinity Study. And what it suggests is that you can safely pull out 4% of your investment portfolio in your first year of retirement and then adjust that amount for inflation each year after that and have a super high probability of your money lasting for the rest of your life.
But, and this is really important, we have to add a little modern reality check here. Those original studies, they were based on historical market returns. Some newer analyses are showing that in today's world, with lower interest rates and all, that 95% success rate might be a little optimistic. Now, that doesn't mean the rule is broken, not at all. It just means it might be smarter to be a little more conservative. Maybe aim for a 3.5% withdrawal rate instead, or just plan on being a bit more flexible with your spending.
And that's the cool thing about this whole movement, that flexibility is baked right in. FIRE is definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. On one end, you've got lean FIRE. These are the minimalists, people who can live happily on a lot less, which means their FI number is smaller. On the other end, you've got fat FIRE.
This is for folks who want to keep up a pretty high-end lifestyle in retirement, so they obviously need a much bigger portfolio. The key thing is, the math works exactly the same for both. Okay, now we get to the fun part, the strategy. How do you actually build that bridge from where you're standing right now all the way to your FI number? This is the nuts and bolts, the actual action plan.
So first things first, where do you actually put the money you're saving? Well, the long-term data on this is it's overwhelming. You don't need to be a genius stock picker. In fact, you shouldn't even try. Simple, low-cost index funds, the kind that just buy a tiny piece of the entire stock market, consistently beat something like 80% of the highly paid professional fund managers. It is, by far, the simplest and most proven path for the vast majority of us.
But it's not just what you invest in, it's the order in which you do it. The FIRE community has this really smart hierarchy of savings to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck. Step 1, absolutely no exceptions, contribute to your 401k up to the full employer match. That is literally free money and instant 100% return. You can't beat it. Step 2, destroy any high-interest debt. We're talking credit cards. Paying off a card with 20% interest is like getting a guaranteed 20% return on your money. It's a no-brainer. After that, if you can, max out a health savings account, or HSA. It has an incredible triple tax advantage. Then you hit your Roth IRA for that sweet, sweet tax-free growth. And finally, any money left over after all that, that's what you pour into a standard taxable brokerage account.
So, you want to pour some rocket fuel on this whole thing and get there faster? Of course you do. Well, the community has figured out some amazing accelerators. First, stop worrying about $5 lattes. Seriously, focus on the big three: housing, transportation, and food. That's where the real money is. Next, you could try something called house hacking, where you buy a duplex or a triplex, live one unit, and rent out the others to cover your mortgage. Or how about geographic arbitrage? That's where you earn a big city salary working remotely, but live somewhere with a super low cost of living. And here's a simple little mind trick anyone can use, the 72-hour rule. For any non-essential purchase over $100, just force yourself to wait 3 days. It's amazing how often you'll realize you didn't really want it after all.
So let's just imagine. You do it. You follow the plan, you save like a machine, and one day, you hit your number. You did it. You've won the financial game. But here's the thing. The journey isn't actually over. It just changes. So let's talk about the often overlooked realities of life after you've reached financial independence.
This is the question that so many people in the race to FIRE completely forget to ask themselves. The whole focus is on hitting the number, reaching the destination. But what do you actually do when you get there? The challenges you'll find shift from being financial to being, well, a little more existential.
All of a sudden, you're faced with this whole new set of puzzles to solve. I mean, how do you find a sense of purpose when you don't have a job to go to? How do you figure out the whole healthcare thing before you're eligible for Medicare? And you have to deal with new kinds of financial risks, like something called sequence of returns risk. It sounds complicated, but it just means that a big market crash right after you retire is way more damaging than a crash 10 years into retirement. And that's exactly why a lot of early retirees use more flexible withdrawal strategies, like the guardrails method. They just spend a little more when the market is up and pull back a little when it's down. It's a smart way to protect your nest egg for the long haul.
And all of this brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. The movement is called financial independence, retire early. But for so many people who actually get there, the goal isn't really to just stop working and sit on a beach for 40 years. It's about winning the freedom to choose. The freedom to work on something you're passionate about even if it doesn't pay well. The freedom to spend way more time with your family. The freedom to start a business without that constant fear of financial ruin. So maybe the ultimate prize of FIRE isn't really the end of work at all, but the beginning of a life that you get to live completely 100% on your own terms.